So many numbers.
Nikki's doing.
Nikki's doing it?
Okay.
Dawn, you're giving up your space. Thanks.
So,
Okay, welcome to the Transient Guest Tax Committee meeting for 2016. I think we won the prize for having the first committee meeting of the year. So would members state their names for a record of attendance?
Jeff Cohen. Good morning, everyone. I'm Brendan Jensen from District 6.
Okay. The agenda was on the public meetings notice. I don't know if the public knows where to find the agenda, but if you go on our website and it's the public meetings notice calendar, you can get the agenda off of that. So the first thing on the agenda after calling to order is the approve of minutes. So I would entertain a motion if someone wants to. Councilman Cohen moves. Councilman Brinson seconds. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the minutes pass. The next thing on the agenda is the 2016 transient guest tax allocations, and Nikki, I think, handed out a handout that we're going to go over.
sure. Good morning, Nikki Lee, Budget Manager. Thank you. What you all have in front of you is actually, we'll go through the 2015 column in more detail for agenda item number 5, just to kind of give an update on where 2015 is projected to end at this point. But as far as 2016 transient guest tax allocations, as part of the budget process, what the council did is approve the total allocation amount, which at this point we projected to be around $383,000. And what council approved as part of the resolution back in December is who actually would be receiving that distribution of funds, which, as you're aware, is Constitution Hall, Downtown Plaza, Historic Jayhawk Theater, and then the Evel Knievel Museum. And the next step, as I understand it, we'll be working through development agreements, which is happening right now, with each of those entities to really work out how those distributions will happen. On the finance side, we get our first distribution for 16 not until around April, so we haven't actually distributed any of the funds yet. But once all of those agreements are in place, then those funds will actually start to be distributed. So other than that, I don't really have an update on 16 unless you have questions for us.
What's the time? I know we have to submit this for the budget process. So what's going to be the timeline that we look at the next year's budget and figure out what allocations are going to go of the 7%,
Sure.
like we've done in the past?
So really, the most important piece of the budget is the bottom line. So once we get to talk about the 2017 budget, which will really start to build between now and May, really what we need is kind of that chunk of money, which we already really have slated in. We think it's going to be about 383% plus whatever growth factor we apply in the few months. Sorry, Bill. So really, what we need for the budget is that total amount. So there's really not a hard deadline that must be met to say exactly who's going to get it for the budget process. Now, I think for each of those entities and just for kind of the planning purposes, it's best to have those lined out as soon as possible. But as far as the budget's concerned, really what's most important is that kind of that large chunk of money.
Okay, so Nikki, when do you think we need to have our next meeting? I know I'm jumping ahead, but I mean, as far as this process, because when I watched the 2013 January meeting, a lot of that was discussed.
Oh, sure.
I wanted to make sure we're on time.
Sure. I'd say as far as the 16 budget, you've all already done everything.
Okay.
I'm not sure how it was done in the past, but maybe back in 13, they hadn't actually said how much would be going where. At this point, with the budget, we already know that that amount of money is going to be dedicated and allocated per the development agreements, so we really don't need anything else for the 16 budget at this time.
Okay.
I'd say the next step would be working towards those development agreements, and I'm really not sure what process you all had set up for where and when those appear next.
Okay.
But for the budget, we're really good for 16.
Okay, good deal. Okay, are there any questions? Okay. Then we'll move on to the 2016 Heritage Tourism Grant Review and review of the ordinance and timelines. And Bill, I think you can tell us all about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have handed out before you, there's a front page that has a table on it, so I'll be talking from that. That front page shows you the last couple years, what we have done with the historic preservation grant funding, just to kind of give you an overview. So we started this, actually the new process 2 years ago, 2014. This is the, as you can see there, grants were awarded for improvements up to $222,000, for marketing and planning $13,000, and then in 2015 we stayed about around the same, $215,000 for improvements and $23,000 worth of grants in planning and marketing. Most of the projects in 2014 are closed. We have one in progress, and then all of the ones we awarded last year are currently in progress. We have a timeline for this coming year. This is the last year of the fund as it relates to this program. We would anticipate sending out requests for proposals probably in the next month. We would like to know how much we have, because we want to draw this down to zero. And so Nikki is going to make sure we have the amount probably in February at some point, so we know how much we're dealing with. But I think we budgeted about 100,000 or so. So it's not going to be as much as what we've had in the past.
Well, that kind of entertains the question as to, we heard that 7% is less than our big surrounding cities, and so the Lodging Association was okay with extending the 1% that we did last year. Is this something that we need to consider to extend the Heritage Tourism Grant? Is it 1% of the 7%, or half of, what is the Heritage Tourism Grant?
I'm looking at Brandon. Maybe he can explain the 1%.
So the 1% that's set aside for historical ended in 2015. So that the way that money is distributed is 106,000 goes to the Riverfront Park, and then 94,000 went to the Great Overland Station. And then anything that was received over the top of that 200,000 then went to the historic preservation grants. So that money ends in 2015.
So do we need to entertain a discussion of extending that so that it moves forward as we did?
Well, we can't, because we've disassembled that entire funding mechanism. The 1% that we extended, we're now allocating to a completely different structure.
Okay.
To do that, you would have to look at adding maybe another percent.
Or half a percent. Okay. I think that's worthy of, I know the Heritage Tourism Grants have helped in Topeka with our heritage tourism, so.
I think it's certainly worth a discussion. I would want to involve the Lodging Association
Right.
and the hoteliers right out of the gate
Right.
before we discuss
Right.
increasing their taxes on them.
Okay.
But yes, I do agree. The work that's come out of those grants has been substantial and
Right.
impressive. So finding a funding mechanism to continue that improvements in our historic preservation, I think, is definitely something we should look into if we can.
And city staff, do you have any suggestions for that, or is that something that, because I know it involves a lot of work with the staff?
Well, as Brandon said, I mean, we would have to, find another revenue for that. But in terms of us administering something like that, we absolutely are prepared to do that if that's the way the body decides. So it's been, you can see from the applicants in the past, I mean, there's a handful, select few. So I think what has happened with the new allocation, it may have, a few of the other entities may have dropped off that don't have access to continued funding for their sites. So, it's something worth considering for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think we ought to, I don't think we need any motions, but I think we ought to defer defer that to the next meeting, and in the meantime, we can all research with the Lodging Association and even the historical, Chris and everybody, as to whether or not that's a doable option. And then also research, again, I think we probably need that handout, Brandon, of what the area cities charge in their guest tax. So,
Bill, in the meantime, could you give us some sort of estimate as to what an effective budget would be in terms of historic preservation grants? What's the amount of money that would have maximum impact, that would be realistic? I mean, obviously, billions of dollars would have maximum impact, but what's something realistic that we could set as sort of a soft target and aim for that we could use to continue furthering the work in the community? And I certainly don't expect you to come up with it now, but
right.
at some point,
I could come back with
that would be
something.
At least give us a starting point for discussion.
Sure.
Thank you.
We can do that.
okay, are there any other questions? Okay. Then, Nikki, you want to cover the next thing, the 2015 distribution of funds that we
Sure.
handed out?
So what you have in front of you is a similar layout to how we've been laying out the budgets and the actuals. 2015 isn't actually closed yet, so there's an asterisk here on 2015 that it's unaudited. Part of the reason is that we don't have the December distribution yet, so what there is an estimate in here for the last month. And once we get those actuals, we'll go back and apply that so we have final numbers. We don't actually have close out the prior year until a few months into 16. So 2015 numbers are still moving target a little bit. But this is based on the estimates that we've got so far on the distributions. And what you can see here is that in 2015, revenue was about a little under 2.6 million, which is over 2014. And then we expend out basically whatever revenue we get in plus whatever balance we have available. So we're projecting that we extend out what you see on the bottom there under the total. And that goes along with, you all saw a budget amendment and some projections before that let you know that we got revenues higher than we expected in 15, so then our grantees actually got a little bit more than we projected. But you will see final numbers once we've got audited actuals for 2015 pretty soon.
Are there any questions about the allocations? And I'm not sure if this is where to put this in, but is there a way, if we do have overages, that we would, Bill, I know we want to do the signs, the, what's it called, wayfinding signs, which I know I, coming in from I-70 and 75, see the big signs, and I know the solar lighting is broken and it's not working. And I do feel like we need to find some money to fix the signs that we have in Topeka. We are the capital city, and our signs should be well taken care of. So, but I'm not, I'm real concerned about spending tourism dollars on that. But if we had an overage that we could declare that that's going to go into the wayfinding signs rather than taking away from any of the tourist attractions. So I wanted to throw that out there for discussion, because I do believe we need to discuss the wayfinding signs and where we get the money and how much money we would need. So you want to kind of fill us in on?
I can tell you where we're at right now, that we are, the MTPO and Visit Topeka are collaborating on an update of the wayfinding sign program, a plan. We should be coming back to the community here in the next month or so to kind of show what they've come up with. So we will have a plan in place, which is a good thing. New signs, a new sign recommendation, what it would look like, a maintenance, what it would do to maintain those. So you'll have a package, and you'll know the cost estimate. I would hate to guess right now, but you're looking at a couple $100,000, several $100,000 to get going.
You're taking care of it.
Yeah, we're taking care of it. Yeah, so no, that's where we're at right now, and so definitely we have a plan coming forth that you can consider that for. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Anybody have any questions about the allocations or any other thing? Okay. The next thing then on the agenda is number 6, discussion of tourism information, hotels and motels. I'm sorry that Brett's not here, Odig, with Visit Topeka, but I wanted to bring this up as a discussion topic now because it came out at a meeting that I was with the Lodging Association, with several on the board and Kurt Young, that in some cities they require the hotel or motel put in each room the tourism in that town. And a couple of the members had said to me that if Topeka required it, then they would have to put it in the rooms. Right now, they can just put it in the lobby. And even this past New Year's Eve, we were staying at the Ramada, and of course, I went through their stuff of what's to do in Topeka. And I found that there was, even missing information. For example, when they list churches or religious, there's not several things missing. So I'm wondering if we can begin that discussion, not do anything today about it, but begin that discussion that we have either a committee or the Lodging Association has a committee. We research whether or not, Mary and I have talked about this, whether other cities, have it in an ordinance, whether it's in the permit to do business in the city, how that works. But we would obviously want to have it consistent in the hotels, and I think that's what you see in other cities, that they have a consistent, whether it's the Visit, they've changed the CVB. It's no longer CVB. It's Visit Wichita or Visit Overland Park or Visit Topeka, that they have consistently this information that goes into the hotels for what to do in the city. So I'd like your input, from the members, what you think about this discussion of, moving forward. We would definitely need to bring the Lodging Association in. We would need the Visit Topeka to be in, and how we would fund that and how other cities fund it. But the comment was made to me that we don't do it in Topeka because they're not required to do it. And their corporate, their corporate parent, if they're big corporations and big chains, they aren't going to do it unless the city requires it.
Maybe a happy medium is, instead of forcing them to maintain materials in every room, is to provide it at check-in.
Well, and that's because then you have to update it. I know
Yeah.
the
But
Visit
then all you're
Topeka
doing is
puts
pulling
out
a
a
pamphlet
quarterly
out of a
thing.
box
but-
and handing it to somebody. So,
Right. But I think that's one of our things that is lacking in Topeka, because we don't have consistently the same tourist information. I know when I walked the steps, the 396 steps up to the top of the Capitol, and talked to several people that were standing around outside looking, they had no idea that Overland Station was over there. What are all those flags over there? Or Prairie, or not Prairie, what's it called?
Old Prairie Town.
Prairie Town.
Old Prairie.
Old Prairie Town. We just don't have something that says, here's what's in Topeka, this is what you need to see while you're here. And there's nothing consistently. I've even talked with the library about putting, stuff together that the library would disseminate to hotels or even at tourist attractions, so that you would see the same thing. You'd pick it up at Old Prairie Town or Overland Station, that type of thing.
Visit Topeka has talked extensively about doing this. My understanding is, however, there's just no funding for it. So I think the first thing we would need to do is identify a funding source. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars by the time these documents have to be maintained constantly. So you need to have a staff person either dedicated to it or at least partially dedicated to it. And then you've got printing costs for all that, distribution. So my expectation is, first we would need to identify money, and then if you go to a hotelier and say, here's everything you need to be successful in what we're requiring you to do, then it's much easier for them to say, oh, all I have to do is pull something out of a box and hand it to somebody? Okay, fine, I'll do that.
It's almost like the bid fund. We found the money for the bid fund.
We did.
And I think it
Yep.
does come out of the fact that we collect a tax. Yeah, and not that we have to add any new taxes or
Agreed,
new
absolutely.
funds, but.
We just need to identify a funding
Right.
source for the project.
Right.
I do agree that it's important, and getting it in people's hands is critical for it to be successful.
Right,
But paying for it, I think, is our first priority.
right. And that's where we have to discuss that with Visit Topeka, the Lodging Association, and other cities, and see how they're doing it. Because if a hotelier is going to tell me, we don't put it in the rooms because we're not required to, because the corporation that owns them says, if the city doesn't require it, you don't do it.
Well, they're responsible to their shareholders, and it
Right.
costs money to do that.
Right.
So I can't say that I blame them, honestly.
Right. So that's one of the discussions. So if we can also defer that to the next meeting that we have, and in the meantime, try to find out if we can get some research on how other cities do collect money to pay for having the tourist information in the hotels, in the lodging. So, okay? So that's number 6. Is there anybody that wants to comment on that, that's in the conferees? No? Okay. Anything else to come before the committee? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to it.
Okay, Councilman Cohen moved to adjourn. and-
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned. Well, I guess we have to vote.
Oh.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That was short and sweet.